Boston, Massachusetts, summer of 2025. 17-year-old Amara Vale perched on the windowsill of her second-story bedroom, eyes scanning the quiet street below. Elmwood Drive was lined with elm trees that arched gracefully over the sidewalks, their leaves whispering in the wind. From here, everything seemed peaceful. Ordinary. Perfectly ordinary. But Amara knew the cracks hidden beneath the calm. She had grown up learning to notice them. Her father, Ethan Vale, was a journalist, one of the few who chased truth when everyone else chased headlines. He often lingered late into the night at his study desk, scribbling notes, muttering names of politicians, businessmen, and people who thought themselves untouchable. "Remember, Amara," he said one evening, "the world is built on lies. Most people just don't see them." Her mother, Claire, often smiled at Ethan's intensity, her hands busy shelving old books. Claire ran the home with warmth, always ensuring laughter echoed through their house, even when Ethan brought dark news home. She was Amara's refuge, but that refuge was fragile. Amara's nights were often spent in the study, leaning over scraps of Ethan's drafts. Her father noticed her curiosity early and encouraged it. "Observe, don't just look," he said. "A pattern hides in plain sight if you know how to see it." It was in these moments that Amara learned what would later become her greatest weapon: patience, attention to detail, and the cold understanding that knowledge was power. That summer, though, the whispers of danger had begun. Strange black SUVs lingered near Elmwood Drive. Ethan grew tense, constantly checking his phone, reading emails with anxious frowns. Amara noticed the way his hands trembled slightly when he closed the door behind him. "Don't worry, sweetie," he said one night, brushing ash from a fireplace book. "Nothing will happen to us." She wanted to believe him, but the fire of intuition burned inside her, an ember of fear she could not ignore. And she was right to fear. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She tiptoed to the living room to check on her parents. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. Her father's office door was slightly ajar, the lamp inside casting a faint glow. He looked up from his notes. "If anything ever happens to me, Amara," he said, voice low, trembling slightly, "it won't be an accident." She nodded, not fully understanding. By dawn, she would. The calm of Elmwood Drive would be destroyed, replaced with smoke, sirens, and the irrevocable crackle of loss. The night started like any other in Boston: cool air, the distant hum of traffic, streetlights casting a soft amber glow on Elmwood Drive. 17-year-old Amara Vale was in her bedroom, pretending to study, but her mind wandered over the strange SUV she had noticed earlier that week. Its windows were tinted too dark, its engine idling too long. Something about it felt wrong, though she couldn't yet explain why. Then came the smell. Smoke. Acrid, heavy, unnatural. Her bedroom curtains flickered with orange light. At first, she thought it was lightning, though the sky was clear. Then the crackling began. A sharp, violent sound that seemed to tear through the walls. She jumped from her desk, heart pounding. Flames licked the edges of the living room. Thick black smoke began to curl up the staircase. "Mom! Dad!" she screamed, voice cracking. The fire had already consumed the main floor. Amara's parents emerged from the smoke-filled hallway seconds later. Her father, Ethan, grabbed her hand, his face streaked with soot and panic. Her mother, Claire, wrapped her arms around Amara, trying to shield her from the heat. The fire spread with terrifying speed. Within moments, it devoured the walls, the furniture, everything they had built. Windows exploded with a deafening pop. Flames danced along the roofline. Amara felt the heat burn her skin even through the thin fabric of her pajamas. She stumbled, coughing violently. Her father shouted for her to stay low. Together, they made their way to the front door. But it wouldn't open. The lock had melted in the heat. The smoke was suffocating. Panic clawed at her chest. Her father's eyes, wide with terror, met hers. He knew they didn't have time. He pushed her toward the back window. "Jump!" he yelled. Her heart froze. She looked down. A sheer drop to the backyard below. Burning debris rained around her. Go! Now! Amara didn't hesitate. She leaped, landing hard on the grass. Pain shot through her ankle, but she scrambled away from the burning house. She turned to see her father drag her mother back into the flames, screaming, trying to save her. The fire consumed them almost immediately. Amara couldn't run to them. She couldn't fight it. All she could do was watch. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. The house was reduced to smoldering ash. Only charred remnants of furniture and twisted metal remained. Neighbors gathered, faces pale, whispering prayers and consolations. But none of it reached Amara. She was frozen, trembling, staring at the ruin of her family. The police called it an electrical fire. Tragic accident, they said. Insurance adjusters offered apologies and forms. Neighbors offered condolences. The media reported a brief story. Teen girl loses parents in Boston house fire. But Amara knew better. The black SUV from earlier that week had been gone. But she remembered its license plate. The anonymous threats her father had received. The quiet way he had told her that something might happen. It hadn't been an accident. That night, under the glowing embers and dark sky, Amara Vale died, and Mara Kane was born. The ride to her aunt's house in Greenwich, Connecticut was silent. Amara sat in the back seat of her aunt's old sedan, staring out the window at passing trees and suburban homes. Everything felt too bright, too calm, too ordinary. Her aunt, Vivian Vale, had a strict, orderly home but little patience for grief. She didn't ask about the fire. She didn't comfort Amara. She only provided rules and schedules. You'll sleep here. School starts Monday. Don't make trouble, Vivian said flatly, her tone like steel. Amara said nothing. Words were useless anyway. Words had failed her when the fire had stolen everything. Her room was small, sparsely furnished, but she didn't care. The walls didn't matter. She had learned that home was wherever she could think. The first weeks were the hardest. Mornings dragged, and nights were long. Memories of her parents haunted her. Her mother's soft laugh, her father's insistence that truth mattered, the way they had both been alive just days before. But grief alone would not help her. Anger alone would not help her. She realized she needed power, knowledge, and strategy. Her father had left her more than memories. Among his old papers were files, notes, and drafts about the consortium, the network of powerful men who had silenced him. Names she didn't fully understand yet. Names she would memorize. Names she would hunt. Amara made a decision then. She would not let their deaths be meaningless. Over the next several years, Amara began shaping herself in secret. Academics excelled in mathematics, computer science, and behavioral psychology. Devoured finance journals, cybersecurity manuals, and criminology texts. Practical skills. Learned hacking, digital forensics, and surveillance techniques. Practiced physical conditioning, running, climbing, self-defense. Observation. Developed the ability to notice patterns in human behavior. Studied people in public. Their micro-expressions, their habits, their weaknesses. She became methodical, patient, and precise. Nothing was left to chance. By the time she turned 23, Amara had changed completely. She had adopted a new identity, Mara Kane. As she moved to New York City, blending into the world of finance, technology, and private intelligence. As she built contacts discreetly, always anonymous, always invisible. As she developed her philosophy, revenge is not an emotional outburst, it is a calculated surgical strike. Mara Kane was not just Amara Vale reborn. She was a weapon. Every late night spent studying, every scar on her hands from early hacking experiments, every sleepless night in dark libraries had forged her. And her first target loomed on the horizon. Benedict Cole, Boston shipping magnate and one of the men responsible for her parents' deaths. Mara Kane's first priority was information. Knowledge, after all, was her greatest weapon. She had spent years studying the men who had destroyed her life, and now it was time to learn every detail about their lives, their businesses, and their weaknesses. Benedict Cole was her first target. Publicly, Cole was a respected shipping magnate in Boston Harbor. He was a philanthropist, a donor to civic causes, and a fixture in Boston's elite social circles. But privately, Mara had learned he was ruthless. Smuggling contraband through his shipping routes, bribing officials, and silencing anyone who questioned him, including her father. Mara didn't rush. She didn't confront him directly. That would have been reckless. Instead, she started small, invisible. She rented a small apartment near Boston Harbor, posing as a consultant in logistics and security auditing. From there, she could watch Cole's shipping operations, his daily routines, his meetings. She noted which employees could be bribed, which suppliers were loyal or corrupt, which security measures were weak. Every detail was a puzzle piece. Every mistake Cole made was a thread Mara could pull. Mara's cyber skills came into play. She began tracing financial trails through shell companies, mapping connections between Cole and political figures, accessing internal communications, just enough to know who trusted whom. By the time Cole even suspected a problem, Mara had already infiltrated multiple layers of his empire without leaving a trace. Mara began planting seeds of paranoia. Her anonymous tips to investigative journalists hinted at irregular shipping activity. Minor partners suddenly found themselves cut out of deals. Emails accidentally leaked to the wrong people. Cole began to notice patterns. He became increasingly nervous, checking his emails obsessively, calling meetings that always seemed to go wrong. Every action he took to protect himself only played into Mara's plan. Months passed. Mara's strategy was methodical and slow. Cole's partners began turning against him. Competitors were tipped off to his hidden operations. Minor leaks snowballed into legal investigations. Cole's empire, once untouchable, began crumbling quietly. No explosions, no public fights, just a silent, unstoppable erosion. And through it all, Mara remained unseen. She smiled at the irony. The man who had burned her family alive would fall apart without ever knowing who had set the fire beneath his empire. By the time Mara left Boston, Benedict Cole was already crumbling. The first strike had been quiet, methodical, devastating. She had proven to herself that precision and patience worked. Her next target was more dangerous. Senator Raymond Cade, a Massachusetts politician who had used his influence to bury her father's investigations. Cade's power wasn't just financial, it was political, legal, and social. If Mara wanted justice, she would need to operate in the shadows of the political machine itself. Mara moved into Cambridge, a city buzzing with academia, startups, and political lobbying. Posing as a political consultant and digital strategy expert, she gained access to Cade's campaign office. Her charm and intellect were disarming. Staffers and advisors quickly welcomed her. She took note of everyone's behavior, alliances, and secrets, cataloging weaknesses like pieces on a chessboard. "Your campaign has potential," she told Cade during their first meeting, smiling. "But some things leave you vulnerable." He laughed. Arrogance was his greatest flaw. He underestimated her. Mara's digital skills allowed her to access campaign emails, donor records, and private meetings. She discovered bribes disguised as donations, deals with lobbyists that violated campaign ethics, personal indiscretions that, if exposed, would ruin his public image. Instead of leaking everything at once, she moved strategically, giving Cade's enemies just enough to sow suspicion and paranoia. Mara played a careful game, as she whispered doubts to Cade's inner circle, suggesting disloyalty among advisors. As she planted subtle accidental leaks to journalists, creating a ripple effect in the media. Cade began losing sleep, pacing late at night, checking emails obsessively, trusting no one. By the time he suspected sabotage, it was too late. Mara had already mapped his network completely, and his allies were beginning to turn against him. Cade's campaign fell apart in stages. The critical donor withdrew funding after a leak suggested corruption. Media outlets ran exposés on his questionable ethics. Advisors abandoned him, fearing association. The final blow came when Mara anonymously provided documents to federal investigators. Cade was publicly humiliated, facing official inquiries, media scrutiny, and betrayal from his closest allies. He once believed he was untouchable. Now he was isolated, paranoid, and broken. Mara watched the news from a cafe window, sipping black coffee. No celebration. No triumph. Just calm satisfaction. Her revenge was not about emotion, it was about justice. Julian Cross was everything Mara had learned to fear and respect. Charismatic, cunning, untouchable, and arrogant. He owned one of New York's most powerful media empires, a network of television stations, online news outlets, and investigative journalism platforms. He controlled narratives, manipulated public perception, and, most importantly, had once assisted the consortium in silencing her father. Mara knew that confronting him directly would be reckless. Julian Cross had a reputation for ruthless retaliation. She needed a different approach. She would get close. Too close. Mara applied for a position as a digital security and strategy consultant for Cross Media Group. Her credentials were impeccable, her demeanor polished, her intelligence undeniable. Within weeks, she was working in his office, a modern, glass and steel skyscraper overlooking Central Park. Julian noticed her immediately. Her presence was commanding yet unthreatening, curious yet professional. "I like your style," he said during their first meeting. "You notice things others don't." Mara smiled faintly, exactly as planned. Working within the company, Mara quietly mapped everything. Key executives, their loyalties and ambitions. Financial irregularities hidden within subsidiaries. Sensitive information that could ruin him if exposed. She watched Julian closely, noting his patterns, weaknesses, and overconfidence. Men like him believed themselves untouchable because they controlled perception. Mara intended to exploit every flaw. Mara played the long game. She did not confront. She did not threaten. She became indispensable, advising him on digital strategy, media campaigns, and cybersecurity, offering insights that made him rely on her judgment, encouraging him to reveal secrets and internal conflicts, often in casual conversations or meetings. Julian, arrogant and used to flattery, confided in her. He trusted her implicitly, his biggest mistake. Mara's plan was surgical. She began planting subtle misinformation within the company to sow mistrust between executives, quietly leaking hints of financial mismanagement to journalists, encouraging Julian to make risky acquisitions, knowing they would backfire. By the time he noticed anything amiss, Mara had already set the dominoes in motion. Executives turned against him, competitors exploited weaknesses, and the media slowly painted a narrative of scandal. Unlike Cole or Cade, Julian Cross posed a unique danger. Proximity could compromise Mara emotionally. She had to remain detached, even as he attempted to charm her personally. There were moments when his arrogance slipped into vulnerability, when Mara saw glimpses of the man behind the empire. She recognized the danger. Attachment could ruin years of preparation. She reminded herself constantly, he is not a person, he is a target. The first public signs of trouble emerged 6 months into her infiltration. A minor scandal involving misallocated funds was reported in a business journal. The key executives resigned unexpectedly, citing personal differences with Julian. The social media and online forums began discussing rumors of corruption and mismanagement. Julian's empire began to wobble, and Mara remained invisible. An unseen force dismantling the man who had once helped destroy her family. Mara had been patient. Every move she made had been calculated, subtle, and invisible to everyone but herself. Julian Cross, once untouchable, now stood at the edge of a precipice. Mara leaked incriminating financial documents to journalists, timed to coincide with a controversial acquisition. Executives who had trusted Julian switched sides, quietly sabotaging operations. As she manipulated social media and online news narratives, ensuring public scrutiny intensified. Julian's arrogance blinded him. He failed to notice the coordinated attacks unraveling his empire. One morning, Mara entered his office with a calm smile. "You've built an empire, Julian. But even empires crumble from the inside. By evening, the story broke across national news. Embezzlement, corporate fraud, and mismanagement. Investors pulled out. Partners severed ties. Julian's media empire, once invincible, was in chaos. For the first time in decades, he was powerless. Mara watched the televised press conference where he stumbled through excuses, humiliated, as the world turned against him. No need for threats. No need for guns. Her revenge was complete. The remaining consortium members, lawyers, lobbyists, financiers who had helped orchestrate her parents' deaths, were fewer, but still dangerous. Mara approached them with surgical precision. 1. Anonymous tips to regulatory agencies exposed shady practices. 2. Insider leaks destabilized their businesses. 3. Strategic psychological manipulation turned allies against each other. By the time they realized someone was targeting them, it was too late. Their power structures were collapsing, and the web Mara had woven was inescapable. Through careful observation, she ensured no collateral damage. Her revenge was precise, surgical, and absolute. Finally, Mara arranged a private meeting with the last remaining consortium leaders in a secluded Tribeca loft. Akol, Cade, Cross, and minor members were present, expecting negotiations, threats, or intimidation. Amara entered alone, confident, carrying nothing but a briefcase. "I assume you know why I'm here," she said, voice calm, unwavering. Over the next hour, she revealed every secret, every crime, every betrayal. Each man realized the empire they built was in ruins, and that their downfall had been orchestrated by a single, invisible force. Cole begged for leniency. Cade attempted to negotiate. Cross glared, realizing too late that he had been manipulated from within. Mara remained unflinching. She handed the documents to the authorities anonymously. Within hours, police and federal investigators began taking action. The consortium collapsed in chaos. She left the loft without a single hair out of place, unseen, untouchable. Standing on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise, Mara watched the city wake. The river shimmered like molten gold. She had avenged her parents. Every person who had destroyed her family had fallen. Every empire she had dismantled lay in ruin. Yet the victory felt hollow. Revenge had cost her decades of solitude, anonymity, and emotional connection. She had no family, no friends, no home. Just the cold satisfaction of justice served. She smiled faintly. Fire had taken everything from her once. Now she had returned it in kind. Months later, Mara lived quietly in San Francisco, consulting under a new identity. She never sought fame or fortune. She never flaunted her power. Occasionally, she would revisit the fire that had taken her parents, remembering the pain and the lessons it taught. "Everything burns eventually," she whispered to herself one quiet night. "Some of us just learn to survive the fire and use it." Her revenge was complete. Her enemies were gone. Yet, the lessons of the fire, the precision of patience, and the cost of vengeance remained with her. Etched into every careful choice, every calculated move, every quiet sunrise she watched alone. Mara Kane had survived, and she had won. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos.